Today I set out on a mission to push the colour green to its absolute limit, only using green blocks to make the biggest builds I possibly could. Here are the blocks that I'm going to be using in today's challenge. If you disagree with any of these, then I invite you to try the challenge without them. Let's begin this insane challenge by building something we know is going to work with the colour green. My first warm-up build for this challenge is just going to be a leaf. I savour this build, knowing that it will be my last, somewhat normal build before my descent into green madness. There's nothing too crazy going on here, I'm just mirroring what I'm building on one side on the other, and then using world edit to curve it along with the stem. But now that that's done, I want to make the embodiment of green energy in Minecraft. I thought for a long time of how on earth am I going to build green energy only using green blocks in Minecraft, because I could have built solar panels, but then they would have been green, and you wouldn't have been able to tell that they were solar panels, so that wouldn't work. And then I could have built a hydroelectric plant, but then the water flowing through it would be green, and it'd look like it'd come out of some toxic river, so that wouldn't work either. There was only one type of green energy that I could really see working with the colour green, and that is wind energy. So I get to work. Now, this might not look very green at the moment, it looks very pink to me, but I am going to later set it to moss, since I'm using moss instead of grass, because grass is mostly brown. It's only really the top bit of grass that's actually green. Now, I want to create the impression of a cliff face, so ordinarily I would have used stone, but stone isn't green, so we're not allowed to use that here. So instead of using stone, I use dried kelp blocks. Now, this block does have a white line running through it, but it's not the main colour, so I'm gonna let it slide. Dried kelp blocks are so useful because they're such a darker shade of green. They can really be used for these highlights of the stone that should be in the cliff face, or on lots of other areas too. Next, I'm gonna start building up our windmills. So I build them up in tiers, with the bottom tier being the shortest, and then of course the middle tier being the longest. I make the mistake of deciding that I want these windmills to be on a diagonal. I know, crazy. But that actually does cause me a massive problem, because you see, normally in these windmills, we'd have 4 of these propeller thing. Propeller? What are they called? They're called rotor blades. So we're gonna have 4 of these rotor blades, 2 going up and down and 2 going out to the sides. However, this raises a peculiar problem since we're on a diagonal. As you can see, if I use the same patterns for going up and going out to the sides, the ones going out to the sides look way longer than the ones going up and down. There's quite a simple explanation for this. This is because the ones going up and down are just using the side length of the blocks, which is 1. However, the ones going out to the sides are using the diagonals of the blocks, not the side lengths. And since the hypotenuse of a right angled triangle is longer than the base, that means that this diagonal is more equal to root 2, which is around 1.5. So all of the blocks on diagonals are about 1.5 times longer than going up and down. Which explains why our propellers going out to the sides are so much longer than our ones going up or down. They're about 1.5 times longer. So all we need to do to get them looking normal is divide them by 1.5. Now that the propellers are done, I paste them around the landscape, and now I'm going to make some of these little energy sparks that are going to be surrounding this area. I start off just by making this little lightning bolt-like shape with verdant frog light, and then I surround it with layer after layer of different shades of green glass. And I think what we end up making, it looks pretty cool, so I paste it all around the area, and now this build is done. The next 2 builds vary massively in scale, but they both come with their unique challenges. The first of these 2 that we're going to start now is the biggest possible build I could make using only green blocks. For this build, I wanted to play into something that feels natural, so I decided to make something quite interesting. What if I could make a squid that, if you turned it upside down, also looked like some sort of plant? So I get right on with building this squid, and it is going to be enormous. It's going to go all the way from the new extended height limit down to bedrock. I make its tentacles branch so that if you turn it upside down, it could look like a plant. However, when it's upside down, there is one thing that keeps giving it away, and that's the eye of the squid. As long as the eye's there, I just can't unsee it being a squid. So I'm gonna put these layers of green clouds around it. And now it's time for the big moment, something I have worried about since I started making this giant squid. Is my computer going to be able to load it all in at the same time? Okay, big reveal time. I've turned the render distance up to 35, so it should be able to load it all in, and we're just waiting now. And it's, can I move? No, I can't move, and it's crashed. Okay, well, Number one, am I going to be able to load this all in for the video? And more importantly, has it corrupted the world? Am I going to be able to get back onto this to continue the build? Whilst I try and figure out a way that I'm actually going to be able to show you this mega build, I'm going to move on to something a lot smaller, but something that honestly, from a building point of view, has been way more challenging for me to make. I'm going to try and make a house using only green blocks. Now, houses can be difficult when you're using all of the blocks, but with such a limited block palette, am I going to be able to have all of the blocks I need to make frames, and roof blocks, and filling blocks, and windows? Well, let's find out. I want this house to be crazy, a massive mansion, but I also wanted to keep a little bit of the natural feel that comes along with the colour green. I also cannot help but play into the joke of it being a greenhouse, so we're gonna have some green houses in the greenhouse. The first thing I do is lay out an outline for our greenhouse. So, we're gonna have 2 greenhouses out the front, and now the greenhouse itself, the big one, is going to be split into 3 sections. A greenhouse, and then a greenhouse on the left, and a greenhouse on the right. And the greenhouses on the left and right are going to be glass greenhouses, not the normal greenhouse like the main greenhouse in the middle, and the greenhouses out the front are going to be actual greenhouses where you would store plants, not the I don't know what this is too confusing. This is exactly what I wanted from this joke. We're also going to have 3 towers that are going to kind of bend and twist around like a stick of asparagus or broccoli. Not like broccoli. More like asparagus. So I get blocking out all of the houses. Now, I want this place to be quite eccentric, so some of the walls curve inwards. As you go up a wall, sometimes it will lean outwards at you. The roofs are going to lean outwards as well, and the towers are really twisty. Now, they might look a little bit rough at the moment, but we're going to smooth them out once the rest of the build is done. Now we're going to move on to the roofs. Now, all of the roofs are going to have a massive overhang, but they're also going to have this little lip thing, which is just a little bit of a thicker bit of the roof towards the front of it, and then it gets thinner near the back. Now it's time for the hardest part of this project, the colouring in, since I don't even know if I'm going to have enough green blocks, to be honest. But before we figure out a colour palette for our house, let's go back over to the giant squid and see if I've figured out a way to get to load it all in yet. Okay, so I've figured out a way to load it all in. But it's just if I stand here and don't move whatsoever. It will all stay loaded in and the game won't crash. I've had to lower everything down to the lowest possible level it can be. It's been a real problem. But I think for now we're just going to ignore the problem and maybe we'll be able to load in half of it because that might do the job. And I'm just going to colour in the rings and hope that I don't need to worry about it. So I want the rings to get lighter as they go out. So in the middle we're going to start with dark prismarine and spruce leaves. They're all going to have verdant frog light in them because I want them all to glow a little bit. Then as we go out, we're going to have some lighter tones of green, we're going to have some more green glass, and we're also going to have the streaks of colour that I'm using to colour them in much more spread apart, so they're a lot less solid than the central ring. Now that the rings are done, it's time to get started on the squid, and I want an overall gradient in the squid going from quite dark at the top down to much lighter at the bottom. It was really hard to find a transitionary block between the really neon green of the lime green concrete and the blocks that come before that, but eventually I found slime blocks kind of worked and it was kind of the best thing I could do. Now for the ends of the tentacles, for the fin things, they also need to look like leaves. So I do a nice gradient using all of the different leaf types in the game, going from the darkest all the way to the lightest, and I think it ended up looking really nice. Now I'm gonna have to spend hours trying to get a good shot of this to show you guys. Whilst I'm trying to get a good picture of that, let's finish off the house. I used dried kelp blocks as the border and highlight block for this thing, and honestly, I don't think any of this project would have been possible without dried kelp blocks. It is like the most important out of all the green blocks when you're only using green blocks. I start adding actual overhangs to the buildings, not just the roofs. and then I replace all of the diamond blocks that we've got at the moment with green blocks to fill in the walls, and then I use green stained glass and a little bit of lime stained glass to fill in the windows. I also use dark prismarine for the roofs because it's another kind of dark green block, but it's still able to be differentiated from the very dark green of the dried kelp. And with a few extra details, the greenhouse is complete, and that means that all of the green builds that we've been doing in this video are complete. Let's go and have a look back through all of them and have a reflection on how hard this challenge has been. So on reflection, obviously the leaf was a warm-up build and there was no real struggling there, but green energy, I didn't really struggle either, because I could kind of throw all of the weird green blocks into the windmills and then use all of the others on the landscape to create that contrast between the two. Speaking of contrast though, the hardest build out of all of these was the house. The contrast was just not there. The glass was too similar to the walls and too similar to the moss, and normally I would have used a different kind of stained glass, which the glass on this one really caused me loads of problems. And then the squid, I really would have liked to do the clouds a different colour. I think the contrast between the squid and then a different colour of cloud would have made this build look way better, obviously without the limitations of only being to green. But this challenge was not nearly as impossible as I thought it was going to be, and I really encourage you guys to try it. It's so interesting trying to be creative within these limitations. But as for me, I am never doing this challenge again. It sucked not being able to use all of the blocks. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye!